Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and I sure appreciate you being here today. I would encourage you to subscribe, whether you're listening as a podcast, subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening on, or if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button to make sure that you don't miss an episode. My guest today is Kim Kid Curry. He is a radio guy. He comes from a radio family. And I don't want to kind of mess up his story. I'll let him tell the story. But what happened with him is one day he's doing radio and everything changes with a diagnosis. So, Kid, let's start there. Tell me a little bit about your career in radio and kind of what brought you to this point.
Okay, Rob, nice to meet you. Thank you very much. When I was in high school, my father worked at the local radio station. There was only one radio station in town, and he was the news guy on that station. And he came home one day and he said they were looking for someone to run a show on Sunday morning. It was the God Show. So I was the guy that and what they did was they recorded all the services from the churches in town, and then they played them the following Sunday morning. And they needed just a high school kid to do that because all the other guys were professional broadcasters. So that's how I got started. I went there to run the tapes when they called the God Show. But the first time I heard my voice on the microphone on the radio, because I remember exactly what it was, every hour we had to say, this is KRLN, Canyon City, Colorado, the station with the news reputation, because that's the station identification. And back then it was required every hour and every half hour. So at the first time I said that, it was like, whoa, that's my voice. And I got the bug and ended up going to college, the University of Southern Colorado, back when it was back in the 70s, they call it Southern Colorado State College. But I went there, and then when I was 22 years old, after some years in college and learning things, I decided to apply for jobs around the country, send out some air checks, just some tapes of my show around the country, and got a job offer from Knoxville, Tennessee, a little radio station called 15Q. Now, you called me Kid, my name Kim Kid Curry. Here's how that came about. You couldn't call a guy Kim on the radio in the 70s. There weren't very many Kims on the radio. So they had to come up with a different name for me. Now, when I was in college, the radio station I was working on, again, they didn't want to call me Kim, so they called me Gary Paxton. Now, quick history on the name Gary Paxton. He's the guy that wrote the Monster Mash. The guy picked up the record one day and said, listen, we need to call you something else. We're going to call you Gary Paxton. So that was my radio name on my part-time job in college. So when I got my full-time job in Knoxville, I'm driving across the country and I had to come up with a different name. I didn't want to be Gary Paxton. I was going to be on the radio at 10 o'clock at night. So I thought I would call myself Night Smoke. Ooh. So I drive up to the radio station in Knoxville and I get out the door, and this is vivid memory. It's never gone away. I go up the stairs and I open the door, and there was a lady sitting at the desk, the receptionist, and a big guy behind her. And he had a Hawaiian shirt on and curly hair. He was a big man. And I put out my hand and I said to the receptionist, hello, ma'am. I'm your new nighttime disc jockey. I'm Night Smoke. And the big fat guy behind her says, well, if it isn't Kid Curry. Well, my name is Kim Curry, but when I was growing up, all my friends used to joke and call me Kid Curry, who is a fictitious Western gunslinger. Remember Kid Curry and Hannibal Hayes? That was Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So when I was in grade school and junior high and high school, when they called me Kid, I didn't like it. So when the guy said, well, if it isn't Kid Curry, I said, dude, I hate that name. They've called me that since I was a kid. I hate that name. And he says, well, then I won't sign your check.
There you go.
Kid Curry it is.
That's awesome. Well, okay. So just in terms of when we're recording this,
Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh just passed away recently.
Yes.
And so the interesting part about Rush Limbaugh is that when he originally came on the air, the first radio job he had is right here I'm in Pittsburgh, just outside of Pittsburgh, a little place called McKeesport, Pennsylvania is where he started. And his on-air name was Jeff Christie. And
Yep.
until eventually he then went by his given name of Rush Limbaugh. So uh, somehow I guess you end up with kind of people creating a persona of who they are on the radio. How does that work? That
And
you almost have to be someone else, or you go by a different name. Why is
I
that?
tell you, in those days, back when we all got started, I got started in 1972. I think it's started right around the same time. In those days, you created a character because normally, remember, DJs look at the face. We're not meant to be on TV, so we all came up with characters. Back then, you had Wolfman Jack, you had Shotgun Bob Kelly, you had the Grease Man. You had all these guys who had made up names because they had to make up characters. So I think what happened was they gave you a different name so you could become somebody because most DJs are just boring people. Now, I became Kid Curry. It became a third party to me. I referred to Kid all the time. It's not me. I'm Kim Curry. Kid was a character I created on the radio, and it worked out very well for me. You know, you can find a bunch of Bill Stevens and Bob Smiths on the radio in America, but at the time, there was only one Kid Curry. You couldn't confuse me with anybody else in my entire career, which was a lucky thing for me because I had an act. If you go back to the days when I started in 1972, I'm going to try to recreate this. DJs had big, deep voices. They didn't have little kid voices like me. So the guy said, "You'll be Kid Curry." I was a little kid sounding guy on the radio, and it was a really good character. So, it really stuck, and it made me famous. It really did. So it was a unique situation. So we come up with characters, and that's the same reason why he came. Plus, you don't really, back in those days, you didn't want to give out your personal name on the radio. As a DJ, you didn't want people coming to your house,
Right.
and that happens.
I'm sure. Yeah. Uh, Very interesting. So you advance in your radio career. You go from being kind of a DJ spinning records, so to speak, and well, literally at that point, I'm assuming. And
Yes,
then
sir.
from what I understand, you kind of progress into management. You end up at a radio station down in Miami, and then you get something that changes your life. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, during my radio career, I started off in Knoxville. First went to Miami in 1976. I was there for a few years, establishing my name in Miami. And then I wanted to become a program director. I wanted to become a boss. And my first opportunity was at a station called KTSA in San Antonio, Texas. So I went out there to run that station. At the time, I was a little punk radio guy and I thought I knew everything. So I got fired. And then I went across the street to the other top 40 type radio station, and I ran that radio station. And it became somewhat successful because the guy who was the boss didn't really know what was going on. And then a friend of mine who had a big station up in Washington, D.C., wanted me to come up there and work on the radio just as a DJ. And because it was Washington, D.C., it was large money. And I'd already worked for this guy before, and we knew what we were doing. So we went up to D.C.
Okay.
But he was so famous, I only got there, and 2 months later, he got a job back in Miami. And I didn't want to be following him around the country. So that's when I went to Baltimore, and I did a radio show on B104 in Baltimore for many years. But then I went back to Miami. I got hired back down there. And through time, I eventually became the program director of Power 96 Radio. I got that in 1996. At the time, Power 96 had been on the air for 20 some years. And for the 9 years that I ran the place, we had the highest ratings in the history of the station. I didn't do it myself. I was handed a really good staff. I always referred to it as, I'm the conductor. I have a whole bunch of people. I just conduct differently than everybody else. And it became very, very successful. It was a great run for me. But throughout my career, little goofy things happened. I could, like my eye would fade, or I'd get a real deep pain in my shoulder. One time in particular, now this is in my memoir, Come Get Me Mother, I'm Through is the memoir. But when I was in Washington, D.C. on Wash FM, I did a feature at the end of my show. It was called Bed Check. And I would let kids call in and just let them say whatever they wanted to say. Like they could pick on a teacher or call their brother a name or make a joke about somebody. It was called Bed Check. Now, I had done this feature throughout my radio career at night at 10 p.m. And in other markets, it was very much a little kid feature. In Washington, D.C., it was political. I couldn't believe it. There were adults calling and they were ripping on different politicians. Like, it was really strange. But this guy used to call in and say, hey, it's me. I'm Frank DeFramer. I'm over here at the White House and I just saw the president. He came in and was listening to me on your radio show. And I used to think that's so goofy because I didn't believe him. So I'd hang up on him and go to another call. But he consistently called in. So I stopped him one night and I said, listen, man, I got him off the air. And I said, who are you? And he says, my name is Frank. I'm the framer of the portraits at the White House. Who knew they needed somebody for that?
Right.
Now we know. So through a circumstance, a girlfriend wanted to go take a tour, wanted her grandmother to take a tour of the White House. And because I knew a guy at the White House, I had to call Frank DeFramer. And it was funny when I did because I didn't really know his name. I called the White House and I said, listen, I'm looking for a guy by the name of Frank DeFramer. And they're, oh yeah, Frank's there. He's over here. No problem. I was stunned. I was like, Frank, it's Kid Curry. Hey kid, how you doing? Well, I've got a grandma who wants a tour. Can I come over? And he says, anytime you want. You tell me what day and you just tell the guys when you get there who you are, and I'll tell them that I'm waiting for you and they'll escort you right in. So it was just after the assassination attempt on President Reagan, but they had not changed the security around the White House. So I'm driving around the White House just randomly with this girlfriend and grandma in the back seat of a Toyota Corolla. And I'm driving around and I see this road that looks to me like it goes right up next to the side door of the White House. So I start going down that road. Well, when you go down that road, all the Secret Service guys start going like that and pointing guns, and they were coming out of everywhere. Well, that caused my adrenaline to really begin to run. And as I've learned, and as people know from multiple sclerosis, stress is a trigger. So I'm driving up and I'm seeing these guys come at me and I'm thinking, well, I've got to tell them who I am. So I stop the car real quick and I put it in park and I start to get out of the car and my entire right side of my head disappears. I can't see. My shoulder goes and I fall out of the car. So now the Secret Service is thinking, well, who is this whack? And they're all getting closer and closer. I'm yelling, oh, I'm Kid Curry. I'm Kid Curry. And the guys, hey, Kid Curry. Hey, how you doing? Frank's waiting for you. Come on in. But that was a trigger. Those things happened to me throughout my career and I didn't know what it was. Stress would hit and I would fall or something would happen. So remember the tsunami around 2004. The first time we'd seen anything like that on television. It was an extremely terrible time. I was on vacation out here in Colorado from Miami. I brought my wife and my kids out here, and we were out here watching the tsunami with my mother, who was devastated. She didn't even know what the word meant. So after that weekend, I'm going back to Miami. My mother says, there's something wrong with you. And I said, Mom, what's wrong with me is I'm running the biggest radio station in Miami. I work all the time. We just looked at the tsunami. I'm stressed by that. And she said, no, there's something else. Your eye doesn't look right. You're not walking straight. And that was in December. In January, my wife said, we got to go check this out. There's something really wrong. By March, I got diagnosed. And a week after I got diagnosed, I decided that was it because I was going down fast and I had to retire because I love my radio station. And I was so focused on what was happening to me, I'd stopped paying attention to the radio station. So I wanted to get out. They didn't want me to. They tried to keep me. I told them, nope, I'm out. I'm going to retire. I'm going to go back to my hometown in Colorado where my mommy is, and I'm going to see what happens. And through a series of modern science, I was on an MS drug for about 8 years and it just didn't work. My
Okay.
doctor insisted we change that drug. And then he also insisted I take high doses of vitamin D. Apparently, there's a connection. MS patients have low vitamin D numbers. We all have low vitamin D numbers, by the way, but MS patients apparently have very low vitamin D numbers. And my doctor, who has this book, Optimal Health with Multiple Sclerosis, believes that if you take vitamin D, massive amounts, along with your medicine, it can change the trajectory of the disease. And strangely enough, after going downhill for a good 8 or 9 years, my condition leveled off. And I mean, it was shocking because I could hardly talk. Dystonia is this thing that you may be familiar with. The muscles in your throat don't work correctly, and MS affects them. ALS patients have it terribly, but it happens to MS patients too. So I could hardly talk. But over the last 6 years, my whatever has slowly come back. My shoulder isn't as sore as it used to be. My eye, still I see darkness, but it's not as bad as it was.
Okay.
My throat's not as closed off as it was. So whatever damage has happened, I'm sitting kind of in neutral right now. Yes, I have exacerbations
Sure.
because that's just what MS does. So
Right.
I spent a lot of time talking there, Rob. I hope I answered a question or two.
Yeah. So no worries. It's kind of giving the understanding and the backstory of kind of what you were going through and what the experience was when you received this diagnosis. And with the diagnosis, you decide, okay, I'm retiring. Um, what what was that decision like for you? What were the emotional implications of that decision?
Well, when you do radio like I did radio and with the people that I did radio with, and because I consider myself a radio baby, I bled radio. In fact, the MS doctor who first diagnosed me, she says that because I was so dedicated and I worked so hard, that the stress I was always under was probably what really kicked in the MS at the age of 50, because it had slowly progressed. But now keep in mind, it was 9 years of running the #1 radio station in Miami, Florida, the best ratings they've ever had. I didn't want to miss anything. I mean, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and listen. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I listen to it while the news is on in the afternoon. And the doctor said that stress is probably what did that to you. You being that so hard into your job is probably what did it. So I can tell you that it got me. It was a hard one. And my wife, who was always, you know, right there with me, she noticed it was really getting me because I did this. This was radio was my blood, and to get out of it, and then to have to turn myself into this whole different person. Because I talk about this too, Rob. You know, when I was Kid Curry and running the big station in Miami, everywhere I went, if I was at the Grammys, people wanted to talk to me. If I was at a convention, people wanted to get next to me. But when you're the MS guy and you can't walk very well anymore, and then you're on first you're on a cane and then you're on crutches, then in a wheelchair, you know this. People don't come close to guys like you and me. They stray from us. And so to be the guy all my life, whether it was
Sure.
the DJ, famous DJ, or the program director, and then to have it all turn just like that. It took me years to figure out what to do with that. In fact, I even had a website one time, waskidcurry.com,
Wow.
because I was Kid Curry. I'm not now. I mean, but I know that I am. I had a real mental problem with it because I wanted
Sure.
to get rid of it. It was not me, because me, I'm in the wheelchair. I'm dying of MS. And so it really bothered me. But my
Yeah.
doctor fixed me, and my wife, who is a international business coach,
Okay.
international business coach, we don't sit back in this house. We
Sure.
move forward.
No, it is, you know, I have very similar experience, right?
Yes.
Where one day I am a fit and active 21-year-old, and the next day I'm paralyzed from the chest down. Like, and the question then becomes, who am I and how does this impact my self-concept? And I'm sure that, you know, there are people out there who go through life and they have experiences like this. Do you have advice for somebody? They may not have an experience exactly like what you or I have, but do you have advice for folks who are going through changes in their life and are struggling with what does this mean about who I am?
Rob, I think, it's pretty simple to me. You wake up in the morning to decide who you're going to be. And if you wake up in the morning and decide, oh, woe is me, oh no, look what's happening to me, um, then you're just going to stay that way all day, and it's going to affect everything around you. We don't do that in my house.
Sure.
Even when I was going down, I can tell you that I never really had MS. I was always struggling to fight through it. When my wife and I moved out here, we got us an acre of property. On that acre, of course, you have to take care of the acre. And I convinced my wife to let me buy a John Deere tractor.
Right.
Gosh, 50 years old, and my wife let me buy a tractor. It was awesome. I got to, it had a front loader and a mower in the middle and a tiller in the back. And I had to work my land. But
Sure.
in order for me to get up on to the tractor with my legs not working, it took me 10 minutes to pull myself up on the tractor.
Okay.
And remember, my legs don't work the accelerator and brake. So I had to hold my leg and push it on the accelerator. And I got really good with pulling it back. And, because I wanted to live my life. I wasn't going to stop. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to let it beat me up. Even though when I got to my hometown, I was walking. I went to a
Right.
cane to crutches to the wheelchair within 3.5 years, but I
Right.
wasn't going to let it stop me. So I think you have to wake up and think, I know, but I'm not going to know. I'm just going to decide I'm going to live the best I can today. And that's what we're supposed to do. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual without religion. But I believe full-heartedly that you control your destiny.
Okay. It's a reminder that um, you can focus on what the differences are. You can look at what the changes are. You can look, because I think about, a lot of professional athletes talk about what's missing in their life when they retire from professional sports, where you have this exhilaration that comes as you are the master on the field and you are this superstar, and then you retire and now you're just another guy who is out there, and you lose that. But you decided that the creativity, the passion, and everything that you had, you reinvented yourself in some ways, or you found a new outlet for that. Can you talk about what you're doing now to share your creativity and to get that out there?
Thanks for asking, Rob. I got to tell you that, as I said, I was the guy. And then when I wasn't the guy, and then my condition leveled off, I had a situation happen. I had a friend from out of nowhere. The radio industry is such that we deal with the music industry hand in hand. And there's a guy, you see the Grammys. So you see the Grammy award winners, you see Taylor Swift, you see the guys get their Grammy awards, but they wouldn't get those Grammy awards were it not for the promoters to get those records on radio stations around America. A guy by the name of Vince Pellegrino had a magazine called Street Information Network. Every year, Vince would have a big award ceremony for the promoters. No one else did this. He was the only one who took care of the promoters, and it got to be a huge award ceremony. I had never attended.
Sure.
It started happening in I don't know, 1993, maybe it started, but I'd never been. So fast forward to somewhere around, I don't know, 2015, 14, I get a phone call, and I had not heard from this guy. He has a birthday on April 1st. Mine is 4/20. We also always say happy birthday to each other.
Sure.
But he called me one day and he said, you disappeared, because I did. I disappeared from the business for a long time. No one knew what happened to me. And he said, you disappeared. I think you need a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I want you to come to my convention, to my award ceremony,
Right.
because I want to give you this award. And stunned was I, because by this time I'm out of the business for 10 years and no one would remember me. But he insisted he wants to give me this award. So he flies me and my family out to New York. There's this big party. There's all this going on. There's all and they put me, I say hi to him backstage because that's where I saw him the first time. And he had a big coat on and a scarf and a hat. And he didn't look good, but it was a few years older. I thought maybe he just got fatter, maybe just, let
Sure.
himself go. So we had this big party. They put me up on stage and I'm in front of people I knew for 30 years. And I got to see all my old friends and it was amazing. I mean, like they gave me the award and they were so gracious to me. The next morning I get together with my friend Vince and Vince proceeds to tell me that he's going to be dead soon. And the reason I brought you out here is because I want you to wake up. I want you to do something. I think you need to get back involved because we need you. And I told him that it had been so long. I didn't know if I could do anything because the music industry is such, you can be out for 2 or 3 years and you're done. The
Right.
radio industry was the same way. When I got out, it all changed.
Sure.
So I had to come up with something. And then my friend Vince passes away about a month and a half later. And for Vince, I thought I've got to figure out what to do. So I knew I couldn't get back in the business. What I wanted to do was write the story of my career and include Vince in the story. So I actually went out because being a DJ and being a talker is different than putting those words on paper. I had no clue. And I remember, my college English professor said to me one day after I flunked my first English test, she said, "Mr. Curry, your problem is you write like you talk."
Okay.
And as a DJ, I walked away going, well, I'm going to be a DJ. I don't need English. So I never went back.
Right.
So flash forward to where I was in my life. I actually decided to hire a writing coach. Found someone up here. She's got a book out, Carrie Flanagan, Guide to Write Magazine Writing, Article Writing. Hired her. She taught me, and she made me work for 6 months. She wouldn't even talk to me till I read books to learn how to write. There's a book called Save the Cat Strikes Back. And she made me read that book, and then she made me read others. And then she talked to me and she taught me how to write. And I spent 6 months doing research after that, spent 6 months writing my memoir, and I got a book produced. And then I had an idea in my head. I went ahead and wrote another book, and that came out. The first book, my memoir, was number 11, got to be number 11 on the Amazon General Broadcasting list. Shocking to me. I couldn't believe it.
Sure.
But the second book actually is somewhat controversial. It's called The Death of Fairness. It talks about what happened after 1987 when President Reagan rescinded the Fairness Doctrine, which was the rule requiring equal time for contrasting points of view. And that sparked another book, which I just completed, and I've got some publishers waiting for me to finish it here in the next month or so. So I've become a whole different person. I'm now a writer, and it's like my radio thing. I don't shut it off. I couldn't shut radio off. I would be up constantly if I was thinking of the next promotion. What am I going to say when I play this next song? And it's like, I write all the time. I get up in the morning at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning is when I do my best writing. And I sit here in my office, and my wife works in an office across from me. Like I said, an international business coach. She goes from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, every half hour, a different client around the world doing business coaching. Wow. So we sit here all day and we're whacking it out, but I've become a writer. In fact, my writing coach gave me this. Can you see it? Kim Curry, writer.
There you go. Cool. Well, okay. So it's in some ways there's 2 parts to it. The essence of who you are hasn't changed, but the way in which the career that you found and the way that you are expressing yourself and what you're doing has changed. And that's cool. Listen, Kim, you have shared a tremendous amount. I appreciate you sharing your story. If people are looking to find you on the web, where can they get a hold of you?
I have a Facebook page, K.R. Curry, the author, as on my Facebook page. I have a website, krcurry.com. And that's where I do all my stuff. And on there, you can see, during the pandemic, because of my radio career, I've had some fairly famous friends. And I called them all in to do interviews with them during the pandemic. And so you can see that there's pandemic interviews, there's my commentary, which I do some commentaries. I do a thing called The View from My Wheelchair, which I'm going to record one here and go live on Facebook in just a few moments.
Sure.
So there's all sorts of things there at krcurry.com. You can also get my books there. There
Excellent.
you
Yeah.
go. That's
Your,
me, Rob.
your pandemic interviews they're all called One Cocktail, right? Is that,
One
or a
cocktail
cocktail?
with kid. Yeah, and the reason I did that was because we all were going into this pandemic, and people. I read a story that people were drinking too much.
Okay.
So I called it One Cocktail. You can get together with me every day, and we're going to have one cocktail with kid. Was the name of the pandemic interviews. So.
Fantastic. Kid, thank you so much for sharing. We're going to do 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready
Yes,
for these?
yes, sir, Rob. I am.
What is your biggest fear?
You know, is that I don't leave my family prepared once I'm gone, but I've done that pretty well. But it's always there in my mind. I want my family to be okay once I'm gone.
Fantastic. Uh, was your favorite family vacation?
Hmm. Okay, it's funny you say that. There was a moment that happened when I brought my wife and my kids up here to Colorado. We were in Miami. I was doing my thing. We came here on vacation, and there's a place here called Seven Falls. It's in Manitou Springs. It's up around the Broadmoor. It's called Seven Falls, where there's a fall that falls from 7 different areas. It's beautiful. And you can actually climb the stairs to get to every level, but it's straight up. And I remember the first time my grandpa took me there when I was this big. It takes forever to get to the top, but at night, it's all lit up. It's beautiful. So I've got my wife, and I'm standing on one of these platforms, and my phone rang. And I took the phone, and I could hardly hear with all the noise, but there is one of my 2 mentors. His name is Bill Tanner. He's on the phone yelling at me saying, "You did it. You did it." And I'm like, "I did what?" So we've got the highest ratings in the history of the station. You did it. And it was at that vacation where we were right there, and we had a very wonderful time. We were having a great time anyway, but
Sure.
that was something that took, that was a 20 some year mission that people never thought I could do it. I mean, people told me I got turned down because people said you're too much of because I was like a little kid DJ.
Sure.
And people didn't expect little kid DJs to be really good program directors,
Hey,
but I
makes
pulled it
sense.
off.
Excellent. Hey, and it's, you have the experience of being with your family, being in a beautiful environment, and getting that kind of call. It's a great
It
story.
was, really
Uh,
was.
all right. So you have been a DJ around the country in different places. You were in Tennessee, you were in Texas, you were in Washington, you're in Miami. Of all of the places that you've been, what is the favorite food that you have experienced? It's kind of whether it's the Cuban food in Miami, or the barbecue or whatever it is in Texas, or um, uh, in Washington, D.C., they have, is it the half smokes and the chili?
Yes.
So what's the food that really stands out to you from your career?
Once again, thanks for asking, Rob. I'm married to a Cuban woman. So there's Cuban food in my house. Interestingly enough, my Cuban wife does not cook, won't even get close to it. My wife is the primary bread giver.
Okay.
so so she does that, and I'm the cook. So I am a pretty good cook of Cuban food, and that's what we have here a lot. As a matter of fact, just last night we had pollo a la plancha con maduros y mariquitas, which is chicken made on a flat grill with onions, grilled onions, and maduros, the long bananas that no one ever buys in the stores, the plantains.
Okay.
If you let them rot until they get dark black, you can cut them in half, or you can cut little slices and fry them. And they are the sweetest treat that you'll ever have as far as a banana. So it's called maduros. And the mariquitas are the green version of the same vegetable. You
Okay.
slice them up thin, when it's green, they come out like potato chips. When it's black, they come out like sweet.
Okay.
So that one plantain. So I'm a Cuban food fan. Thank you for asking.
Hey, sounds good. I appreciate it. Kim Kid Curry, thank you so much for being with us today. Your story is wonderful, and I appreciate your willingness to share. And really, I'm thinking for everyone that's listening, as you're going through life, you're going to get to those times when things change, and you've got to make it's not the same as it was. And especially during this pandemic, where all of a sudden, all of us are in a place where things are changing and we have to adapt. And whether it's like kid where you've got to make a major change and yet you realize the essence of who you are hasn't changed, the way that you express yourself has changed. That's all it comes down to. It's a fantastic story. And I think it's just something we can all learn from. To all my
Rob,
listeners,
very nice talking to you today, too. Thank you very much.
oh, my pleasure. To all my listeners, I'll remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.